under the name of IQ, which works wonderfully well. Of course, a lot of you will be aware that IQ is what is used to measure intelligence. Yeah. So it has a great connection with information and intelligence, but I think the intelligence of the kingdom is wisdom. Hence our Claire has done a beautiful job on changing our signage, and of course now we have the baobab tree, and wisdom is like a baobab tree. No one individual can embrace it, and that's part of our ethos. It's part of who we are as Q. And of course, if you remember when we talked about the baobab, it's called the upside down tree. It's also called the tree of life. And it's the one tree that looks as though it's been stuck in the ground upside down so that its roots are exposed. And that one thing that, of course, Kev Craven was the one who really put us onto that at a time when it just kept coming up, which we felt was a great description of who we are and where we're heading as a house. And so we thought that would be a good reminder, and also to encourage us that not one individual can embrace this. So what we're about, we still believe that wisdom is gleaned from the many, not from the one. And that's why we'll keep an open spirit and weigh things and talk about things, but move our conversation and calling forward. So so let's just pray. Father, just help us tonight just to receive what we need to receive and see what we need to see, and stretch ourselves into what we need to stretch into at these exciting times for us, in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so we thought tonight, next Wednesday, I'd probably like to teach something that Chris and I were talking about while we were in Salt Lake this last time. So next Wednesday, I think I'm going to take a teaching session. But tonight, as we were kind of just coming back after the Christmas break, and of course in the transition week coming up to going from the Rock to Q, we felt it would be probably a good time just to share a little bit of the peripheral things that are going on. I do believe that this journey is a God journey as well as a good journey. As I've explained to you before, is not something that's been plucked out of the air thinking, well, what kind of new idea or scheme can we have? I really believe this is a God-given revelation that we are pursuing. And now, having said that, it is also in some measure scary, because the thing about faith is interesting, because more is talked about faith when faith is not needed than is ever talked about faith when faith is needed, because then we start talking about our fears instead of our faith. Because when nothing's happening, when there's no need to stretch, when every need is met, when everything can be rationalized and planned, there is absolutely no need for faith. Faith is obsolete. And it's not wrong, but for many parts of our life, faith is actually not necessary, because we can see the way through, we plan it, we use our common sense, we get through. And the problem with that is that when we do find ourselves in areas of faith, we A, find out whether we have any, and B, we find out if we do have some, kind of what is the context and quality of that faith, and how equipped are we for encouraging ourselves not to be afraid when we face the impossible and when there's every reason to be afraid. So, when Jesus said fear not, it wasn't because there's nothing to be afraid of. It was fear not, because fear is not the appropriate response if you are going to come through this. And there are a lot of frightening things in life and in ministry, and as you build a church, as you develop a ministry, there can be lots of things that sound wonderful when you say them from the platform, and then the hard realities of what's going to be necessary for that to happen bite home and you realize we need something beyond ourselves. We need miracle. We need God with us and showing himself for us and among us, because lots of this we can't plan. So I invite you to be on this journey of faith. I over recent years have been somewhat troubled because there was a certain pressure within certain streams that I've walked with and people that I've known that you must have a 10-year plan. Well, I've hardly got a 10-day plan, never mind a 10-year plan. And the problem is you could be intimidated by that, thinking, well, I'm supposed to have one. Then you start inventing stuff, or what you do is you make a plan for things that you could do and are possible and can be outworked, rather than saying, okay, God, we're going to be sensible in making arrangements for what we can see, but we are going to leave a big wide open space for that which we can't see, that which we don't know. And we're going to let that be our guide. We're going to let that be our influence. So, we again are on some areas that are ice-breaking. Our message is not popular. And I could justify that to myself by saying Jesus' message wasn't popular and Paul's message. And some of those are self-justification to make me feel better. But the truth is, it's not popular. And as I said to you last week, when we started doing some of the things we were doing and called it Rock City, it would now not be seen as anything new. But at the time, nobody was doing it. And you take flack for that. You don't get praise, but we took criticism. And in fact, some of the people who've used that best to their advantage came and spied on us, but wouldn't support us and help us, and then stole our stuff and have done pretty well out of it, which is okay. Because one of the principles of ice breaking is that icebreakers are making a path for other ships to follow. And if you can't accept that, then you're never going to settle to being an icebreaker, because you don't do it for yourself, you do it for what will follow. So I do believe in the challenges that we have proposed in terms of even what we would call our doctrinal stance and the basis of our belief. That these are important journeys that we're making. There's some important ice that we're breaking. And we don't have all the answers, but that's good. But God is helping us, and we've moved along, and we're formulating and understanding what these things are that are being unfolded. So I thank you for being part of that. And of course, the move to Q is the recognition of where we have come and where we're going. So, the interesting thing is all the little detailed things that have happened that have confirmed our steps as we've gone along. And some of those we've already shared with you. So I'm not going to go over some of that old ground, but I just wanted to encourage you by saying it continues. It just keeps happening. And I wanted to just backtrack story a little bit, and then I'm going to let Chris say some things also tonight on the back of this. Because, of course, we've got this Salt Lake City thing going on and emerging at the moment, which, as I've also said to you before, changing the name of the church and kind of focusing on that direction while attempting to do anything else, most people would say is absolutely stupid, and they'd probably be right. Except for the fact that we know it's God, and we know that actually these are not separate things that are happening. This is one thing that is happening that has many different facets. So let me run you back to 2014, because we first felt something was going to be connected to this in Salt Lake City back in 2013. So it's been quite a long journey. In 2014, when I was there, was the first time I had sought to look up some people, to investigate what churches were there, what was happening in that arena. And I wasn't greatly encouraged then, and I'm still not greatly encouraged by what I've seen, which might sound critical, but then in one hand it needs to be, because you realize how in a heavily dominated Mormon culture, which has relied on a very legalistic gospel and very papalistic authority, most of the churches that think they're radical simply have replaced the Mormon president with the pastor, and have replaced the legalism of Mormonism with the legalism of evangelicalism. And it's not radical at all. It has some looser structures of song and practice than you would see in the Mormon church, but actually it's not that different. There's no real essence of freedom. So when I first started looking into what was happening there, I went to a couple of churches and I met with a couple of guys. Now, let me clarify on that I am not for 1 minute suggesting that there is a lack of sincerity in the leaders there, because that would be absolutely wrong. There's some incredibly sincere men. Nor am I questioning the genuineness of their love for God, because that's not what we're talking about. These are wonderful men and women who absolutely love God and are extremely sincere. What has also interested me is over the last 4 or 5 years of going in there, is to realize that there are many people in leadership in the Mormon church who you cannot question their sincerity or the genuineness of their love for God. However they interpret that, you could not accuse them of being without sincerity and without a genuine love in the context. And that's been an interesting journey for me to see where sometimes you have to connect is not on the level of sincerity or genuineness. It's a deeper level. It comes on the level then of understood truth. And of course, what I believe is at the core of that is actually not understanding the Bible, but actually understanding the character and nature of God. And then we look at the Bible through the character and nature of God. And that really is where the problem is in all of these things, and where we think we have something to contribute to the journey out there. But when I was out there in 2014, it was interesting how God was already stirring things, because I would like to say I'm such a man of faith and revelation that every step of the way I've just known this is what you do and this is what's going to happen, and nothing could be further from the truth. Matt Roberts at Genesis Project, which I've talked to you about before up in Ogden, Utah, he mentioned something that really hit me between the eyes the first Sunday that Chris and I were out there, and we went across to their meeting. And he quoted a verse that I'm familiar with that says, "Your word, O Lord, is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." And what he said was very simple, but it was important for me in the moment, because he said there are times when you have the word that lights the path. So that means you can see the path in front of you. He says, but there are times when the word is only a lamp unto your feet, which means all you can see is the little bit that you're walking on at that time. And quite a lot of this journey, and a lot of our journey at this time has been more lamp unto your feet than it has light unto your path. And so each step along the way, I have needed, and I think on a corporate level, we've needed things to speak to us and lead you onto the next little thing. But I didn't mention this because I didn't want to scare anybody at the time. But 2014, I'm Googling for churches, and lo and behold, I find a rock church, and lo and behold, that rock church meets at 6:45 on a Saturday, which, you can imagine there are little connections like God saying, I'm with you, I know you're here, I've got this. Now, I have to say, this is on tape, but yeah. That was about as much as I would want to pursue down that avenue, is just to know that. Just put it that way, okay? And I did try my best. But that then connected me to this other church I've also mentioned called K2, which is, it came out of a church called Kensington in Troy, Michigan. So this was K2, named after Kensington. It was one of their pastors that came there. And K2 had a little bit more going for it. And is a pretty good church in the context of what it is. It's not my thing. It's not where we're at in our thinking. But Dave Nelson, the pastor, nice guy. I've met with him 2 or 3 times. But what was interesting is my looking for something, of course, my eye was going to be drawn to Rock Church. But in being drawn to Rock Church, when I went to that, they shared the site with K2. So that then pointed me to K2. So from finding the Rock that met at the same time on the same day that we did, I find they're on the same campus as K2, and K2 let them use part of their facility. And so I then am reading K2 stuff, and obviously finished up going having a look at K2. But this is the first thing I read in 2014 when I, through that process, found myself on K2's website. Now, I think you'll see why this is potentially, why it would touch me straight away and why maybe I wasn't so keen to mention this in the meantime. What would happen, this is what was written on the website, what would happen if you dared to let go? Releasing your grip on life and placing it all, dreams, relationships, and priorities, into the hands of God. Sometimes in mountaineering, the climber must entirely release his grip on the rock and fully commit his energy to the attainment of another ledge. For a brief moment, he grasps nothing, a risk he must take to move on, to ascend. So I think you can kind of gather how impacting that was to me. And of course, the struggles that caused for me in 2014 as to whether we were being led away from the rock. Because how do you take it? You must entirely release your grip on the rock and fully commit to attain the other ledge if you want to. Now, obviously, in the meantime, I do not believe that in any way that was an indicator to let go of the rock in the sense of Chris and I being here. However, if you put that with the first sentence, what would happen if you dared to let go? Releasing your grip on life and placing it all, dreams, relationships, and priorities in the hand of God. Those two statements connected together of a sense that if we at all as people were going to move forward, then perhaps my grip on the rock, and I don't think it means that in the sense of being a dominant leader, a controlling leader, because I don't think I am that by nature or have been that. But when you've been in this and part of this and built this and given your life to this and poured your finances into this and your energies and your efforts and pretty much sacrificed your family to get to where you are, even the thought of letting go is not, and again, getting to a certain age as well, that becomes even more, would you do that? So I found myself wrestling with this challenge of, if I had to, would I? And if I did, what did that mean? And what were the implications of that? Because in some way, God was saying that as mountaineering, as climbers, unless there was an entirely release your grip on the rock, that you couldn't attain the other ledge because you have to fully commit. And of course, this bit, again, is worth a mention. For a brief moment, he grasps nothing. It's that bit between holding on here and grabbing there, but they're too far apart to hold them both at the same time. So you have to take a risk if you're going to move on, if you're going to ascend, of that horrible bit in the middle where you let go of one and you grab hold of the other. So that was forming a direction in my heart and spirit about what I was prepared to do personally. And I think what Chris and I were prepared to do, she's a lot more daring than me anyway. And of course, it's within that kind of canvas. If you think of Claire here, that didn't all happen just because she got one brush and went like that. If you saw it on Saturday, you would see that all you had on there was all the colors, all the background was on. And the background had gone onto the colour of the wall. So the picture was emerging, okay, and she's kindly been in this week, and now we have some image to look at. We have some words that we can have context to, but it didn't all happen at once. It's like a painting on a canvas begins to emerge, and our journey to where we are and where we are going is still that canvas onto which we are still painting, which we're still creating, which we still stand back and have a look and realize things need adding in, things might need taking out. And so it was with this journey that Salt Lake being connected to where we were heading. Of course, Q wasn't even in my mind at this time. That wasn't. So in one sense, it was a little scarier because I couldn't see where we were heading here, but there's all these challenges about there. But in God's view, it was all connected and all ready to be revealed, that there was more going to be painted on the canvas. And so last March, God paints Q on the canvas of my heart, and you start making sense. You think, I get it. So we are changing. We are becoming something. This is who we are becoming. This is not separate to that. This is part of that picture. And so it reminded me then of a little story I've also told you. I had the dream about the fork in the road in Knaresborough where one of the roads goes off into the Dales, to Pateley Bridge and down there, and the other one goes around and takes you off to Harrogate. And I had this very, very clear dream. And as I was at that junction, I heard God speak very clearly. I had a decision to make, and the decision was about, again, in the context of what I've just read to you, imagine how I take the words at that time. You can stay and be blessed, or you can go and be a blessing. So this is all riding on the back of this emerging picture, okay? You've got to let go of the rock if you want to attain a new height. You can stay and be blessed, or you can go and be a blessing. Here's the crossroads. And the number of times we've been to that crossroads, and there's a dozen stories around that, which is fascinating. I even called Chris one day about something to do with that, and lo and behold, she's at a spa right there on that crossroads at the time when I called her to talk to her. I mean, it's how these things are used just significantly. So again, tying that with this first thing, do I go? Do I stay and be blessed, knowing that, hey, we could carry on, we will be blessed? Or do you go and be a blessing? Now, of course, the question then, is that an absolute question that God is asking? Is letting go of the rock literally letting go of the rock completely? But then, of course, as the picture has begun to emerge, I realized that letting go of the rock is less about us totally leaving here as it was letting go of what the rock has been as a vehicle to bring us to this place. And having the courage to say we are letting go of that in order to take hold of this new thing here. And I don't know how that will work, We've talked about the fact of there can always be some people who think, well, I joined the rock and this is not the rock now, so that's me. I'm done. And that could happen and can happen. All of those kind of things come into the equation, but it's that little bit between where you have to let go, and we're trying to find what this is, and it might look different and it might feel different, and we, in terms of format for Sunday, I would say some of the direction we go in is not my preference. But since when did the life of the world depend on my preference? And that has been the bugbear of the Christian community for generations. It's not my preference, therefore this is what I prefer. Without having a sense of, it's actually not about what I prefer, it's about how do we bring our faith and belief and our emerging knowledge of God into environments and vehicles and methods and ways that best communicate that, as I said on Sunday, where our responsibility is not to the past, our responsibility is to the future. And I would also say that historically we have been very good at that. I'd say to you guys over here particularly, most of the people that I'm involved with and others that I have been involved with loosely cannot believe how easy you have made this journey for us. Their immediate thought is that if you've done these things, gone this way, you must be getting a lot of grief from the older people, from the mature, from those who've been around. And I have to say, actually, we get no grief from them. We get more grief from others than we ever do. And so I commend you guys. I commend all of you who've got a few years on your back and have been with us for a while, because I think you've already bought into that our responsibility is to the future. So if things have to be different, if we have to learn to flow with that, then we learn to flow with it. So this has kind of been the emerging thing of, and so in that context, we could stay as we are. I could interpret it as the rock and be blessed. Or we can go to where we're being led, and we can be a blessing. And so I think what has happened in us, that we have been moving towards and into and trying to embrace the thing of not staying where we are in any way, shape, or form, but going to become Q, going to the thought processes and beliefs and questions and understandings that we have come to, going to places like Salt Lake City and Wagga Wagga and wherever it is that we are needed to help process and move things in a direction that we have been learning and walking and trialing so that others can glean from that. So we made the decision, we're not staying to be blessed, we're going to be a blessing. So lots of little things which are, again, some I've told you, some I haven't, but just seem to be happening all the time, which I'm very grateful to God because it helps me. It helps me to realize that these are just little supernatural, didn't necessarily have to happen, but are very kindly happening just to say, so when you read in the Bible, those of you who are familiar with it, you'll hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way. Walk in it. That has very much been the experience to many little things. In 2015, again, that's questions in my own heart all the time. I arrive in Salt Lake, I'm coming off the freeway to the place that I'm staying, and there's a huge sign at my turnoff that says, York. It's time to get comfortable. So what's kept appearing is what I see as almost a conflict of interests. Does York, it's time to get comfortable, mean what the heck are you doing here? Get yourself back home because it's time to get comfortable. Or is York the wake up and it's time to get comfortable, the message that says, listen, this is going to be part of your life, it's going to be the part of the way things go. So get comfortable because the two things are tied together. And of course, you already know, those of you who've been listening, that the apartment block that we now have, the apartment that's going to be our base for what we do in Salt Lake, how the show house there was called York. I mean, Murray, Utah, how come your show house at the place where I put the random address into the sat-nav that said live here should be York? I mean, these things to me are they're just too clear to miss. And I'm grateful to God for that. I'm very, very grateful to God for that. And I hope you are too. So just another couple of little things, and then I'll let Chris share a couple of things. Some tiny little things have been amazing. For example, we went 29th of January because we had arranged to take possession of this apartment, which, of course, I told you all the miracles of the bank account and everything else. And we had miracles even going in, we now have something called global entry that gets us into the US really quickly. It'll take us about 3 to 5 minutes going into the country instead of 50 minutes to an hour and a half. That wasn't supposed to happen for 6 months, but a wonderful bodyguard, I said to him, we've applied for global entry, And, we have interviews coming up. He said, look, if you'd just like to take a seat over there, when I'm done here, I'll process you. So he did. Little things like that have just been such an incredible blessing of working past systems that would hold you up, keep you back. But the other funny little thing was we knew we were going to have to move a lot of stuff. So I thought, I need a truck. What I need is a truck, not just so I could be properly American, with a red truck, but we need a truck. Now, in all of my travels, those who travel regularly will know it's better if you use one airline, one car rental place, because obviously you get your rewards for that. And I've used Hertz for years, partly because my flying with Delta gives me particular status with Hertz, so I use Hertz. I have never, ever, in probably 10 years of using Hertz, ever seen a truck offered to me when I look at everything that's there on the site to rent. Never, ever a truck. Until I said to Chris, I said, we really could do with a truck, I think. I went on that same night, and I clicked on, I'd already got a vehicle reserved. I said, could do with the truck. Clicked on, said, give me options. What popped up first? A truck, a pickup truck, a red pickup truck, no less than, which I've never seen before, and cheaper. So what was wonderful is it cost us less money, we had exactly what we needed, and it was a real lifesaver while we was there, was this truck to move things around. And I've never seen one before, but I'd also arranged a vehicle for our next trip in February, and I said to Chris, I think we could do with the truck because there's a few more things we need to get. Lo and behold, the same truck is on this time. It's never been on in the history ever. But it's that little things like that of just being, the little miracles that God has just been doing it's the favor upon our way, favor. And so that favor helps me to feel that we keep going the way that we're going until such times as we really feel that's not it. So, two more things I'll just say on that. One is, some of you may not understand the significance of Mount Olympus. Mount Olympus is the Greek mountain that was the place where the Greek gods live. So Zeus and Poseidon and all of those, Hercules. Mount Olympus is really the center of Greco-Roman religious thinking. And we've said to you many times that so much of what is called Christian doctrine has been influenced by Greco-Roman thinking more than it has really Christ's teaching. Some of our authority structures and how we perceive God and who we think God is and how we think God's work looks more like the Greek gods of Mount Olympus than it does of the Christ of Calvary or the God of Mount Zion. What fascinated me from the first time we went to Salt Lake City is that the dominant mountain over the Salt Lake Valley is Mount Olympus. And what's interesting is we have a place in Murray, which is 11 miles south of downtown Salt Lake. And Murray is directly in line with Mount Olympus. So we see it from the apartment. We can see Mount Olympus, which to us is very interesting because that's the whole part of our calling, of what we're trying to deal with, what we're trying to address, is this contamination of the understanding of the character and nature of God that's been influenced by those kind of things. So all those sort of things have been interesting. I also told you that our apartment is right next to what's called Artesian Springs Tower. And it's all built on reclaimed land. And it was an old dry cleaning plant that left behind toxic chemicals, and it cost tens of millions of dollars to remove the toxic chemicals from the soil. It was neglected and polluted, a 200-acre site, but now it's the home of a whole bunch of townhomes and apartments, and they're throwing up apartments there like there's no tomorrow, all on this reclaimed ground that was neglected and polluted. But has now become a place for people to live. And that also spoke to us that our whole purpose is to deal with the pollution that's come into the understanding of the character and nature of God and the expression and the deformation of the more beautiful gospel, that into that toxic ground we are coming to bring something that builds something and creates community and life. So all of those things together all keep adding up. So let me just give you one other thing. When we went to Scottsbluff in 1986, which was part of, we've explained our journey and the two are cross-connected, I won't go into all that. There was one scripture that I came across and was also prophesied, and it just came to keep emerging. And I'm proposing this to you just tonight again so that you have a clear understanding of, I know what it is that I am called to, what it is I believe we're called to, and therefore what the expression of this house is. And this is that scripture in Isaiah 58 and verse 11 and 12. This is what it says: "The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. And you will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail." And then here's what's going to happen out of that. "Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations, and you will be called repairer of broken walls and restorer of streets with dwellings." And that really is our heart in what we're doing here, in what we're doing there, in what we're doing as a whole, is to restore some things, restore streets for dwellings, repair broken walls, to reestablish the honor of who God really is and the more beautiful gospel. So, So I hope your heart's with us. I hope you're beginning to understand something of the context of this and will be with us and stand with us and pray with us. Because there are implications, obviously, that we can't be there and here at the same time. So when we're not here, this has to be what it is. And when we're there, we have to be what we are. And it's going to take team, and it's going to take, So we really need more than ever for all of you to find your place, find your role, find the little piece of the jigsaw that you can bring in that makes this work, so that here or there, it's all working. Because one thing I do know is that I lost the whole ego thing of wanting to build something that made my name great many years ago. It dies, you get knocked out of you. So that's not what I'm looking for. I want us. What I like about this, it says your people will, right? Not you, your people will. And really, if we haven't accomplished anything. If Chris, we haven't accomplished anything. But if our people are rebuilding and making, then we do it. So we need you. We need you to step up. We need you to step out. We need you to exercise your faith. We need you to use your giftings. We need you to have faith and be sacrificial and make this whole thing work. Because I know that as sure as we've kept seeing all these little pieces adding together, there's nothing about the outworking of this that God will be surprised at, because he's got it all figured. And he wants to keep speaking to us and keep speaking to you and keep doing things that say, come on, it's okay, we're all in this together, you've got it, you're on the right path, this is going good. Here's my last thing. I have a number that I have had since 1988. It's very important to me. And because it's very important to me, I can't even explain to you the full context, because then you'd know the number that's very important to me. And But that number, which is very strange, is attached to the apartment that we have taken in a most remarkable way that if I could explain to you the full detail, I would, but I can't. But if you knew the detail of that, you'd know the possibility of that happening in the way that it has happened is in the tens of thousands to one of likelihood of it even coming close to happening. But little things like that are even very private that I can't share are so accurate and so on the ball that we know that God is with us. So if you say, well, what does all this totally mean for the future? I don't know. We've just got a lamp unto our feet, and we're just finding our way with that lamp to our feet and believing God and knowing that God is with us. So, I might Chris just come and share some thoughts on the journey.
Hello. Isn't that awesome? It's great, isn't it? So thrilled about it. Okay, there's just a few things I wanted to add from my point of view. Like Anne said, there's many things that have been happening that you can immediately say, oh, that, you know, this is proof that this is right. But I was saying to Jenny before, we aren't saying these things to try and convince you or, you know, to reinforce the choices that we are making. Because in all honesty, once you've felt it in here, you're going to do it anyway, whether you feel that things are confirmed or not. But it does help. It does help to think, oh, that's interesting. And there's been a lot of those that have happened, like Hans already said. And I see things obviously different than Anth does. It doesn't take away, though, like Anth says, from the nervousness of it all, because you are doing things that are just out there. You know, I mean, even arriving, you know what it's like when you go on holiday. You know, you arrive in a strange place, you've got to figure out where the shops are, you've got to figure where your main facilities are, and you know you're only going to be there for a couple of weeks, and you do it, but you don't know people. And, you know, we've gone there, and we can honestly say we don't know people. And so we have no helps in that sense, but we're trusting for it to unfold. And we did have a couple that came down from Ogden to help us empty this a pod, whatever you call it, that had been filled very kindly with some stuff that was sent to us, you know, furniture for the apartment. Now, I just want to cut in there and say, when we were in Scottsbluff back in 1986, things happened totally differently. Because when we arrived there, we found this apartment, and we had nothing. We had no furniture or anything. It was just absolutely empty. There was carpets throughout, but that was it. Had nothing. And we went on that first Sunday to the church. Meantime, we were stayed in a hotel because we had nothing, no furniture in there. And when we got into the church, this lady who was the secretary, she said, what, you know, where are you living? What are you doing? And we said, we've got an apartment, but we haven't got any furniture yet, so we're staying in the Scottsbluff Inn. She says, come to my mother's house. She's got a basement that's absolutely full of furniture that will fill the whole apartment. Come and just take what you want. Now, that is miraculous, isn't it? Now, because we've had that experience, you can automatically assume that that's how it's going to happen this time. And so you're thinking, well, we'll arrive in Salt Lake, we'll get off the plane, and somebody will just look at us because they're waiting for somebody in a black coat or a red jumper or whatever, and they'll say, God's told me I've got to come and tell you that I'm going to provide all this. And, you know, you're thinking that can happen. And, of course, when it doesn't, you're thinking, okay, what now? So when we went this time, and I'll go back to picking up the story of Bellingham, and I need a drink, please, too. Bob Nichols' son happened to be attached to a hotel chain that had refurbished everything and allowed him to have all this furniture for charity. And so he said, what do you need? You know, let us know, and we'll put it in a pod, and we'll ship it to you. Now, of course, we've not seen any of this. It's like, well, have you got a bed? Have you got a chest of drawers or whatever, or whatever? And he says, yeah. He says, I'll fix you up. So when we went on the 29th, we'd arranged for this pod to arrive in Salt Lake, a bit far out at one of these great big container yards. I'm not kidding you. It must have spread the whole size of York. It was that big, you know. Where's our container? And there's thousands of them, you know. Anyway, we went on the 29th to, we arrived on the Friday, and we thought we'd better go and check this thing out. And I mean, it was brilliant. We opened it up, and of course, it's absolutely chocker with things. But sometimes you don't realize that when people are being kind, they might actually be creating another problem. Because, first of all, because it's from a five-star hotel, it's not cheap stuff. It's actually solid. It's heavy. And there's me and Ant that have got to somehow get it. And isn't it miraculous that this apartment is on the ground floor? Although, even though it's ground floor, you've got to get it over a balcony, which means you've got to, hulk everything up and over. So, anyway, what I'm really trying to say is that when we went to Scottsbluff, it happened one way. God provided in another. But then when you're trying to be a good steward and you're wanting to watch the pennies and you're wanting to be careful how much you're spending, you realize that sometimes it doesn't often work the way you want it to work. Because when we opened up all this stuff, we realized that there was a bed frame, but there was no lats. So if you put a mattress in the middle, it just fell to the bottom. But anyway, I know that sounds funny, but these are the things you're having to figure out. So what you're going to do. Anyway, let me rewind. We arrived on the Friday afternoon. And, we were a bit jet-lagged, and we found ourselves in bed at 7:30. And so we got up 1:30 in the morning, and we hit Walmart. And it was great, because there's nobody in there, and there was just us with these trolleys picking up the things that we needed. And then we went and had breakfast, and then we went to the moment the stores were opening, like the furniture stores. And would you believe we could actually buy a mattress and pick it up on the Monday, which... It's rare that you can do that in England, isn't it? I mean, usually speaking, you have to order a mattress and it's a few weeks. But we could actually pick one up by the Monday. But you see, he had a truck, so we could literally go. Otherwise, it was going to cost us another $80 to have this thing delivered to us. But we had the truck, so yeah, it was great. But when we went and bought this mattress, and this is what I really want to tell you. And I need a tissue, I'm sorry. Let me get a tissue. You got to forgive me. I'm very emotional, you see, when I talk. But when we went into this place to buy this mattress, and again, we didn't have time to go shopping around because this is Saturday. It was New Year's Day on the Monday? Tuesday, we were moving in. So that's how quickly we were having to try and get this together. We didn't want to stay in the hotel any longer than we needed to because that's all added expense. And we try and, honestly, I'm only saying this not to blow my trumpet, but we are trying to be good stewards and do what's right, not only with our time and investment, but with your investment because we really honor all that you're doing. Anyway, got this mattress and... we said, oh, well, while we're here, this is a great big furniture store like you would not believe. And, oh, well, while we're in here, let's have a look around. And let's go and have a look at a telly. Because, if we're going to have long hours here, we might as well have a telly. And we goes over, which must have been half a mile to the other side of this furniture store. And, there was just, hundreds of televisions. And you might think this is really weird, I'm telling this, but it mattered to me. Can you put no, let me say first and then get ready to put this video on, okay? Because every single television was showing the same thing. And you can imagine it all the way around this room. It was literally unbelievable. And you put it on now, because I want to...
All it can do is wait for one to slip and fall.
And we're talking sheer cliffs here. Look at this.
But these youngsters are fast learners, and they're now almost as sure-footed as their parents. fox will have to find its meal elsewhere.
Now, you might think that that's just weird, but if you remember years ago, we had a ministry on this, and it was about I think it's in Psalms 88 or something like that, and it says that he has made our feet to be like hinds' feet on rocky places, and that has stayed with me for years. And when we walked into that place, and you can imagine that's all the way round, wall to wall, and when you look at that, it actually looks as though they're on flat ground. We're talking sheer faces, and they're jumping, and it was just utterly unbelievable for me. And there was a carry on a little bit after that. I took that off YouTube. But then it says, what do you call him? That fella who, Peter Attenborough, he says, the ibex were born to do this. And that was just a little bit of an encouragement that we were in this position where we literally felt like our feet are on very sheer places, but we were being told, you've been given feet like the hinds' feet, sure-footedness and able to grip and what have you. Anyway, I've got to carry on now, because when we buy a telly and get the telly home, and I'm setting it up. No, it wasn't on that day, because, oh yes, we did. No, it was after, wasn't it? But let's say, move forward a couple of days. After the Tuesday that we moved in, gets it out, sets it up, tunes it in, guess what was on? That very same clip. And I don't mean when he'd set it up, then we turned it on to sit down and watch. He was just tuning it fine. That was the very first thing that was on. And I said, I just can't believe this. What's going on? It was like, this is it. You have got those sort of feet that can actually take that sort of rocky ground. So anyway, we did finally get pieces of lats. We went to the shop, even though we were on the mattress on the floor for a few days. I think it was the day before we left to come back, we went to Home Depot, and we cut the lats to 5 foot exactly, 12 of them, and went and fitted it in this frame. And what was interesting, we were going to throw this frame away, because when you're not sure of what's being sent in this pod, you're sometimes thinking, is the stuff we've got, is it really going to work? Or would we be better just going and buying a bed base or what have you? And of course, you're looking at them, they're like $500, and you're thinking, I'm not doing that, I'll sleep on the floor, I'm not doing that. But as it happened, in the end, we were able to get these lats of wood and fix them ourselves, and our mattress got off the floor, which was really very nice. Let me think now. So on the Tuesday, we moved in, and of course, that was the day that Anth had his big accident. Because he'd had visions of, do you remember when we moved all that furniture from Aviva? Some of you do, some of you don't, but I'll tell you what. I mean, Dave and Anth and Danny particularly, and James, you were wrecked, weren't you, because of how heavy that stuff was. And that's what we had to face with this stuff. And he's, carrying this great heavy desk, which, incidentally, we thought they were sending this little glass, very light little desk so that we had something to work from or even eat from, because we had no table or anything. So this great big thing, and then, of course, he had this fall, and it put him out of action a little bit, but he was brave and he soldiered on. You were very brave, weren't you? Very brave. Right, okay, so that was on the Saturday, and we knew we were going to church on the Sunday because we wanted to go up and see Ogden, the people there, because we like Anth was saying, the only light that we've got at the moment is the step in front. What do? You don't know where you're meant to be. You don't know who you're meant to be reaching or talking to, although we feel very, very much that where God has put us, when there was the live here over the apartments, the people in there are so lonely, and you think, well, why would God be sending us all the way over there just to lonely people? Surely there's enough lonely people in our own city. But you know, if that is what it's for, if somebody has been chosen in there for something special and we're meant to take the word to them, then we better just do as we're told. But anyway, we went up to Ogden on the Sunday. Yeah, it was like all one long thing at first because we couldn't sleep. We couldn't get any rest because we were so jet lagged. So we went for the very early service, and it's like going as far as Scarborough. And we went for the 9:30 service there. And, you know, we were listening to all that was going on. And then Matt comes out to preach, and he puts this picture up. Can you put the burn the ships, please? And it was just quite remarkable. No, burn the ships. We can have that one as well if you like. Should we talk about that one first? No. Oh. Burn the ships. And we got it. Okay, it doesn't matter. So we were in the church, and then Matt comes out to preach, and up on the screen goes this big sign, and it says, burn the ships. And he went on to talk about Captain Cortez, Portuguese captain who went to basically capture Mexico in 15-something or other, 1590 or something. And his story, he was basically about, you know, making New Year's resolutions and are we going to keep them and what's going to keep us on track and this sort of thing. But what really was the story that he used was quite amazing, because the story goes that Mexico had failed to ever be taken in many, many centuries by anybody of a you know, military or naval power. And what happened was when Cortez arrived, he, instead of taking his troops and immediately going to war, he basically encouraged all his military, and he fed them and he encouraged them after a very long trip from Portugal. And then he said to them, he says, right, you're all wonderfully encouraged and you're fed and you're rested. He says, now what we're going to do is go and burn the ships. And you're thinking, whoa, oh my. And they're saying, well, what for? He says, because if we really intend on taking this land, there can be no way of escape or going back. And, of course, as he's saying this, I'm thinking, yeah, here we go. You know, this is the word. And, you know, then he talked about what are the options that we keep open in our lives that allow that retreat. And it's a good question for us all, because we all like to keep little, you know, things in the closet that we can decide to go back and get if we feel like it. And his encouragement was to destroy any options, which I thought was just amazing for us. And then just a few days before, we'd been looking at Facebook, and there was a big, well, on the things that I follow anyway, they were talking about what would we call 2018, the year of, you know, is it the year of, you know, we had a year of hope. What would you call it? And there's a way that people tend to find things that rhyme, and it's all a bit twee, and nobody could come up with a good one. But anyway, Matt carried on in his ministry, and he said, I think that 2018 should be the year of Abraham. And I thought, oh, here we go, because he was willing to leave his father's house, and he was willing to go to a land that he didn't know anything about, and he was willing to, by faith, you know. So you can imagine, as I'm sat there listening to this, and I'm thinking this is really quite on the money. And as this was sort of going into my heart, I was reminded of the story that we used many years ago when we did the movie night of Gattaca. It's an old film, and some of you probably won't have even heard of it other than what we showed that time. But the basic story goes, it's two brothers who were competing against each other, and one always seemed to be the weaker of the other. And it doesn't matter the reasons why, but one always seemed to be weaker. And they would set off swimming across a lake. And for a while, they were neck and neck. And then the weaker one would suddenly realize he was getting tired, so he would stop and turn round in order to get back to the shore, in order to protect himself. And that always made the stronger brother feel very much that I'm the one. And then as the story goes on, they come to a point where they do this again. And when it came to the spot where the weaker brother usually would stop and turn around, he kept going, and he kept going, and he kept going. And it was what appeared to be the stronger brother that suddenly lost his courage, and he stopped, and he's thinking, what's going on here? He's carrying on, and I'm the one who normally is beating him. And of course, at that point, he realizes that the brother who he thought was very weak had passed him, kept going, and he won. And later on in the film, it says, when I asked my brother, or when he asked me, how did I do it? His answer was this: I saved nothing for the return swim. And again, that's a line that stayed with me for many years, because it's like, are you destroying the option? Are you burning the ship that would actually allow you to go back? And he said to his brother, the reason why I won was because there wasn't any return. I was either going to do it or I was going to die, basically. He hadn't saved anything. The energy he had was only to win, not to get him back. And so that was all a very wonderful encouragement for me. And okay, so then we get moved in. We're in there and filling the apartment, different things, doing stuff. And there's probably lots I could tell you, but I'm not going to obviously tell you all. But back in March when we were there, and Danny already put the picture up, we were in a shop, just a little card shop, and I must admit I'm a bit of a sucker for cards with sayings on them. I always think they're really interesting. And there was one, can you put the leap and the net will appear, please? And I took a photograph of this because, again, back in March, we were wondering what all this meant. Are we, aren't we, shouldn't we, all of this. And I looked at this and it said, leap and the net will appear. Now, what's really interesting for me, and I know everybody has their own journeys, but you see where it says at the bottom, Zen saying. Now, if I'm honest with you, 15 years ago, the very fact that was a Zen saying, I would have rejected it. It would be like, no, that's not Bible. You can't have that. You can't have any truth to it. And yet, I looked at that and I thought, you know what? It's a Zen saying. But God's in this. Life's in this. Whatever we want to call it, because everybody has a different way of expressing and verbalizing things. And that spoke to me. And so for a while now, that's been a little saying for us. It's jump and the net will appear. But like Anthony said at the beginning, sometimes leaving go of one thing before you grasp the other, it's a bit scary. So let's just jump then to this last Sunday. Now, you might say, what are you doing, looking for church as well? Like I say, we're looking to connect and for basically God to show us who and why and what. And so we're looking on Google and we're looking at all the churches and, going on their sites and having a little look. And it's very clear that what we are meant to be doing is certainly taking the message of a more beautiful gospel, without doubt, because everywhere you go, you think to yourself, oh, this looks promising. And we always find ourselves where you would have to say it's not very beautiful. And you listen for a while and you think, oh, yeah, no, this sounds all right. And then it starts lovely, and then it all veers off. Because what happens is you realize that they've got to seal the deal at the end to get people who are sat there to recognize that they're not what they ought to be. Seriously, that's how it is. So it's like, this year, 2018, are you going to let go of your sin? Are you going to let go of all these things that are holding you in bondage? Are you going to let go and really be what God wants you to be? And the amount of condemnation that's then heaped on people, and you're thinking to yourself, it's finished. He said, I want to shout, no, it's finished. And you think, no, just be a good girl, sit still. And anyway, there was this church that we found, and it was called the Ecclesia. So we thought we would go there because we thought the name sounded great and there's hope. Little did we know, though, that they called it the Ecclesia, not because they have any understanding about what it means, but the fact that any church in Salt Lake that's called church is automatically assumed to be Mormon. So churches that are not like K2, Rock, Ecclesia, and many more, Grace Chapel or whatever, they give them different names because they don't call them churches, because the church is the LDS, is Mormon, which opens your eyes to a whole new thing that even, there's such a stronghold even in the context of what they call church. So we went to Ecclesia, but what was lovely was we were immediately met by a lovely young chap, and he came over, was very, very warm and welcoming, and he asked what we were doing there. And I'll tell you what, when somebody asks you a question like that, you're suddenly thinking, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? And you suddenly get all a little bit. And so, you draw on what because there are things you could say, but it's not going to go down very well, is it? You could really dive into some great prophetic insights, and they might never talk to you again. So we just said, well, we're on a pilgrimage, basically. We feel God's led us here. But when you start actually looking at the whole issue of Salt Lake City, it is to say that it's that seat of such huge influence in the sense of religion. It's the least Christian, the least of all the states of America. It's the place where fewer people go to encourage people in something new, because in essence they feel it's a stronghold, so people don't go. And so when we said, we just felt that God has led us here, we mentioned about how we'd been in Scottsbluff and how that was like the middle of the journey, and we'd learned things there, and this is like bringing the journey to another place. And immediately he just said, well, I really feel that I'm meant to learn something from you, and would we get in touch? So when the service had finished, we just went and gave him our telephone number on a piece of paper, because you don't want to push yourself or anything or impose. It was just, here's our name and number. If you want to get together, blah, blah, blah. The very following morning, we get a phone call inviting us for dinner, and we had a most lovely time with them, very open, lovely people. And what was nice, and I can't tell you all the specifics, but after we'd spoken for a little while, again, being very careful to be just honouring of their invitation, he suddenly turns, and on the wall, he had a window frame with glass in, and but it was like a picture, but it was like this window frame with glass in. And in each frame, he had written in red felt tip pen questions. Now, this is so, it makes you go a bit goosey, because he suddenly turned, he says, I have questions, and they're all written in red felt tip pen on the glass. And it's all the things that we have struggled with over the years. And he was saying, what do you do about that? What do you think about that? And we're saying, we need to get together to, you can't answer that in a second. But, with a great question. We've asked those questions, and yeah, sure, we'd love to help you. So that was really, really lovely. But as I say, to see the red felt tip pen written on the glass, the questions that he's been asking was really quite. He'd written it. Literally, they were written on this window. And if you know what I mean, it wasn't a window, it was an old window frame that was on the wall with the glass in. Right. On the second, again, you might not think that this is very important, but it was to me. We moved into the apartment on the second We'd only arrived on the Friday, remember, and on the Tuesday, we literally moved in. And on that morning, Mr. Monson, who is the big prophet, president prophet of all the Mormons of the world, he died. And it's really quite weird because you think to yourself, heck, how, coincidental, yes, I know, I'm not reading it into more than that, but it's like one thing ended and we arrived. And Paul Widmark, one of the guys that we've met up in Ogden, he just says, isn't that interesting? He says, you moved in and he moved out. And it was like, whoa. Now, they are actually more that way inclined to think those things. Oh, almost it's ordained of God. He's moved out, you've moved in. I don't think like that anymore, but it is an interesting piece of information. Now, the thing was, he was laid in state on Thursday night this week, and his funeral was on Friday. We came on Wednesday, and I said, nah, this isn't right. I need to stay another day. I wanted to go and see it. Apparently 30,000 people were at his funeral. And the guy who's taking over is 93, would you believe? Because they don't put in somebody who's younger or whatever. It's the next in line. So the way that they lead everything is just totally by structure and hierarchy. And so the guy who's taken over is 93. And that's quite interesting, isn't it, that should happen on literally the day that we moved in. What else did I want to say? Was there anything else? Oh, yeah, Ecclesia. Just put the picture up of that, and then I'll finish. Right. So when the E at the bottom stands for Ecclesia. And I took this picture for a few reasons. I like what they're saying. We exist to see Salt Lake City saturated. I like the fact that it was orange. I did. I thought, come on, let's have some orange. With the good news of Jesus. And there's one big thing like that at either side. And yet, what was sad, the news wasn't very good. It wasn't good news. And like I said a few minutes ago, what seemed to be really the pushing thing was one of holiness and sanctification, which everybody was getting quite a beating to say what you weren't rather than what you were. And, I'm thinking that's the difference, isn't it, between what we call the more beautiful gospel, recognizing what we already are, not what we're meant to be, accepted as we are. So was there anything else I had, or was that it? Oh, yeah, and I just took a picture of the artesian spring because I felt that that lights up at night and it's beautiful and it changes colour all the time, artesian springs. Now, when Anth mentioned that, about what he could see, he says from the hotel, he could see that and he could see the state building. So it's the government building and then this ground that used to be toxic that now is this place where we've got an apartment. So basically, we're about 50 yards from that. Now, what's interesting, I said at the beginning how you have to sort of navigate a place to find out where you are. It's funny, the few times I've gone down the same roads, but they just haven't registered. It's like, where on earth am I? I really don't know where I am. And what you recognised is where this big tower is and where our place is literally just down the street from this hotel. It's hardly, you can see it. It's not as if it's miles away, but because we kept coming to it from a different road, we thought we were like in a different suburb or what have you. It's actually right there. And when we come out of the end of our street, our street, it's our street, our house, our street, and you turn to the left immediately. And I didn't realize this was the case because I'd always come to it from the other side. You're literally on State Street, and as you pull out and turn to the left, there is the government. There it is. And every time you go towards the city, you're literally looking at it. And what you see, the two landmarks are the government building and this, and it is really quite powerful because you're saying, yes, one government, which is one of I don't want. I'm really concerned that you don't want to go to somebody. You're not wanting to pull down people's long-term held beliefs. That's not what we're doing. And if people want to keep what they've got and they're happy with what they've got, that's great. But there's a lot of people who are incredibly oppressed, just like they are here, with what they've been handed, and where they're looking for hope, all they're given is more bondage. And I said to Anthony a while ago, and I am a bit of a bolshy person at times, and he said, about going. I said, I'll tell you one thing I won't do. I'm not going somewhere else to invite people to come out of one form of bondage just to go into another. And, I put my hand on my heart and say I'm going to honor that, because if we're going to do anything, it's to actually say there's a better description, there's a better view, there's a better characteristic that you can connect with and be okay. Now, Ant mentioned about a guy who he'd spoken to, and he'd said that he'd love to believe what we were saying, but he just daren't. Because if you hold on to something that says, if you don't do this, this, and this, then you're in serious danger of hellfire, imagine what it's like to be told, actually, you can let go and it's going to be okay. It's like, well, I'm not going to chance it. So they stay in the bondage just in case. And you recognize how many people are living in that level of bondage. And so I'm going to close by saying this. If we really truly believe that we've received a more beautiful gospel, then come on, let's live it out. Let's show it. Let's share it. Let's encourage. Just shine our faces to say, yes, we really are living in the freedom for which Christ died. And everything that we're doing, whether it's our move to Q, which is obviously Quest, the Quest is carrying on, whether it be in York or whether it's in Salt Lake or wherever. It's the quest for what? It's that quest for a new world. And that new world has got to be one where people are free and not bound by religious chains. Is that the right way to put it? So I might have missed some stuff, but is that all right? Is that okay? Oh, can I just say one thing? I do get very torn. So if I can ask for you to think about me at times, because I don't do being away and thinking about what the needs are here. I'm not good at that, because I really take my responsibility very, very seriously. And so when I get on a plane and it's, oh, this is lovely, we're going to have an adventure, I can be just... I can be in a right mess. Now, I'm not somebody who's going to let that be seen fully, but I can be in terrible turmoil inside. And so while we've agreed and we're trusting God for all that's coming, it doesn't mean to say that it isn't done without that struggle. And when all's said and done, am I willing to believe that this is part of my journey to get rid of some of that? Because that maybe is what I need. So anyway, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Super. So, any questions? Anybody want to ask a question? Anything you'd like clarifying? So we're happy to do so. All this is very open, and we're very happy about it. So you all happy? Good. If it was an auction, I'd be putting the gavel down then. Okay, so like Chris said, there are things like, I know she gets more anxious than me because I've always been more prophetic driven for the next thing, but she's always anxious for, well, we're going away and what about, and we ought to, and what if, and so please pray for us in all of that. Also for all the miracles that we need for this to work in the long term, keep confessing. I'm going to say keep confessing rather than praying, because often if we say, will you pray, we kind of asking God for something that we don't think we have, rather than confessing what we know God has for us, but we haven't yet seen. So please be confessing all the provision and everything else we need. And also health. It's interesting, when we were called to go to Scottsbluff in 86, I was really ill for 18 months before that. But knowing that God had told us what we had to do, I needed a real healing, and I got a very specific and particular healing, and we need that now. Chris has to have a scan next week, which is all interesting coming up at this time. 2 weeks today, I have to get a hole drilled in my head for a bone-anchored hearing aid. So just don't tell the doctors, because I should have been in a lot earlier. And when I said I've got to go away, they said, oh, and it's like, well, I couldn't do the first one because we were already away. Oh, you'll have to go to the bottom of the list again. So I thought, I'm telling them now. So I get my head drilled on Wednesday, and we fly out to Salt Lake the following Monday. But I'm not telling them till after I'm there. So don't worry about that, Jan. Be right enough. Be right enough. Yeah. So, just pray for us. God is with us, and these are all little things along the way, and we are not going to let them discourage us or dissuade us or stop us. The work of the kingdom must be done. Like Jesus said, I'm about my Father's business. So we are believing for health and strength and everything else that goes with that. So I hope that's not been too imposing tonight and helpful to you, just to kind of get a feel for what we've been up to and how this thing works together and ties together. And then on Sunday, got the right day, on Sunday at 4, we'll begin the connection here with all that journey entails, and we shall move forward and hopefully touch many lives with the more beautiful gospel. So let's just give thanks. Father, I just want to express gratefulness to you for your very kind and generous leading in this whole process, and for being a lamp to our feet and sometimes a light to our path. And I just pray that there will be a spirit of faith in the house, that we just won't be also rans, that we won't be just people who are repeating the same old things over and over again, but that in that spirit of faith, we will move something forward in our generation, that will make a sound that's not being heard, that something that means something in the bigger picture of not preserving the past, but actually creating the future, will emerge out of this house and out of us. We are small, like Bethlehem was small. But your promise was that, Bethlehem, you're not the least of the princes of Judah. Out of you is going to come a ruler who will govern my people Israel. So out of us, out of our smallness, out of what we are, we offer ourselves that significance will be the consequence of our endeavor to walk in faith in your purpose, and to shout out this more beautiful gospel. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, thanks again for being here, and we'll see you all on Sunday.